Let's talk about remote IDs, shall we? Let me start by saying I had a long history in aviation. I owned my own airplane for 12 years, a full scale, the Cessna 150G model. But I got into this interest from, hell, my parents told me I'm no more than a toddler when I would point to an airplane I heard in the sky. And I wasn't even able to talk yet. I would just call it a Maymach. And the interest excelled through preteens. My dad took me into Portland aviation. I don't know, maybe 10 or 11 years old. Got my first airplane ride, which sparked the interest in him, and he later took lessons and got his license. A couple of years after that, he bought his first airplane. It was a 1946 Piper Vagabond. Flew that for a couple of years, and we bought a Citabria. The Citabria is what I took lessons in and soloed at age 16. I got my pilot's license. Like I say, I owned a Cessna 150 for 12 years. Life happens. You go through divorce, and you wind up on the crummy end of the stick. You lose a job that you thought was going to be something to retire from. Technology puts you out of business, and couldn't afford it. So I sold my Cessna 150, thinking years later down the road I'd get back into it. Health problems took over. Can't get a FAA physical anymore. Can't pass a medical. So 12 years ago, I got involved with model aviation. Kept my passion alive. Kept my stick and rudder skills alive. I love it. And as you can tell by looking here around me and behind me, I have quite a few. I've got 4 more stacked over in Elko. I got a couple more out there in a motorhome. And I got a cargo trailer, dual axle cargo trailer that's probably got 10 more in that. But you know, I was trying not to get emotional. Ain't easy. The last probably 5 years, the FAA has been trying to slowly put us guys out of the sky. They wanted us to label all of our airplanes with an FAA number. And at first, you could put the numbers on the inside of your battery hatch, and that wouldn't deter the scale look of the plane at all. But then that wasn't good enough. You got to put it on the outside. And then there was scuttlebutt a few years ago about you're going to have to put modules in them. And the whole reason behind this is to clear the sky, clear the airspace, people like me, your average hobbyist, to make room for drone delivery systems, autonomous air taxis, which is foolishness. It's another thing. It'll never work. Anything that flies is weather dependent. And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want a big, huge drone delivering the neighbor's 10, 15, 20-pound package to their backyard. What if something happens? And this whole remote ID modules. These RC model airplanes are very dependent upon CG. Where are you going to put these damn things? Put them inside the plane. Where? I have fears. That's another thing. I have fears that something that's broadcasting a signal, what's it going to do to my receivers? Because I'm transmitting a signal to the receiver. And what's remote ID going to do? Could compromise the models in that this signal from my transmitter to my receiver could get messed up. This whole thing is just bullshit, to put it in layman's terms. And that's another thing. The remote IDs, I don't think the technology is there yet. They're not mass producing numbers. They haven't talked about how reliable these things are. Incorporated into an airplane already full of electronics. We have to put our receivers in these so that the battery doesn't block them. I don't see how at this stage of the game it can be practical, but we've only got 2.5 more months to go before this is mandatory, and we have to comply. I have to wonder, this is a big airplane. It's a 13-pound airplane with a battery in it. It's a very narrow fuselage. Where am I going to put one of those units in there? You probably can't see it on the camera. It's already packed full. Where am I going to put a remote ID in that? There's so many questions. The FAA said, well, AMA sanctioned fields could become FRIAs. They were going to allow 4,000 FRIA applications. The FAA has not processed one yet. Yet this is going to be in place by September 16th. I don't see how it can happen. So those AMA sanctioned fields, like the one I'm a president of, after September 16th, if they don't have us established as a FRIA, then we got to go with remote ID. How, FAA? How do you propose to implement, launch, and put this law in place by September 16th when you don't have your ducks in a row? Better get off your lazy asses and start processing some FRIAs. Well, who's to say another 2 years down the road you'll cancel those too? This represents my sanity. This has literally been making me sick. I have peripheral arterial disease. My aorta is plugged before it feeds the femorals to my legs. I can't walk very far. I used to have a passion for hunting and fishing. Can't do it anymore. This is all I have. But after September 16th, possibly be all gone. Unless I just want to keep doing it anyway. Wouldn't set a good example for president of the club, but this is where we're at. There's a lot of questions to be answered on our behalf. I fly fixed wing. I don't get involved with these quadcopters. A lot of these high-end quadcopters, press a button, they take off. You can press another button and it returns home. That's not flying. And that's another thing. We have a very severe pilot shortage right now. We are the teenager that, you know, preteens that have an interest in wanting to get involved with this. They can learn a lot from it. Aerodynamics, aeronautics, flight in general. You're going to make it impossible for the father of a 12-year-old to go out and experience grassroots. For a lot of people, this is where it starts. What's that going to do to the pilot shortage? Make it worse. I don't see how this whole remote ID crap can be practical. I've been rehearsing in my mind what I was going to say on this video. But there's just so many things. You go across this country, visit small GA airports. A lot of them will have private hangars. And you will see, in a lot of them, you will see RC aircraft hanging on the walls, or hanging from the rafters, because that's where these pilots got their start. Was an interest in aviation at a young age, and started out with RC models. You gotta chop that all out. I'm at a loss. A lot of us are not going to know how to comply. These so-called remote ID modules there aren't many of them on the market. Oh, and that's another thing. Oh, the FAA said that they won't cost any more than $50. Well, they're considerably more than that right now, if you can find one. I just don't think that this is going to end with remote ID. This is just a precursor. They're looking to take us out of the sky. That's what they're doing. And as you can well imagine by looking at all these, there's some industry behind this. Manufacturers, distributors. Oh, and that's another thing. Talking about distributors. Mom and pop hobby shops are going belly up all over this country because of what it takes to get into this hobby. That's another thing. I have been flying a lot of times where I hear a car pulling up to my location. A guy gets out, in some cases, there's a little kid. Wow, how much one of those cost? And when I tell them the cost, they say, well, that doesn't sound too bad. To get started, you really should buy an AMA membership. That's $70 a year. And then you gotta buy a club membership at a place that is sanctioned by the AMA. Oh, and then you gotta put registration stickers, register through the FAA. Oh, and another thing is now you gotta consider remote ID. You know what happens? That guy with his little boy gets quickly disinterested because it's going to cost too much, it's too complicated, and they never get involved. How's this going to work? Come on, FAA, give us some answers. Because I can see myself being non-compliant. I'm not going to give all this up. I got too much money in it. This video is being filmed in my hangar. It's basically a $25,000 miniature home. It's a 14 by 40. I'm currently working on insulating, wiring, get a heat source fired up. This corner, currently consumed by airplanes, is going to be the bathroom. It's going to be a workshop on one side and a native arts and crafts for my fiance on the other, with a lot of airplanes hanging around. So to say that I'm invested in the hobby is an understatement. I ain't about to give it up. Oh, and that's another thing. Remote ID. Anybody with a cell phone that wants the free app can spy on me flying one of these, pinpoint my location, and generally I fly these out in the middle of nowhere where there's nothing around to hit. I hear a car pulling up. I'm not going to be able to think that it could be somebody possibly interested in the hobby and wants to ask me questions. It could be somebody that wants to come up and rob me. What am I going to have to do? If I am compliant. If I am compliant or non-compliant. It ain't going to matter. I better want to have a means of defending myself. Maybe have a 9mm and a body cam. My safety will be put at risk if I do put remote IDs in these things. Oh, and that's another thing. I got somewhere around 40 airplanes. What's it going to cost me to equip every one of them with a remote ID? They say all these things will be interchangeable between aircraft. So I yank them out and put them in something else if I want to fly a different one. And are these things going to, fragile power source and antenna plugs, are they going to stand up very long? To yanking them out of one and putting them into another? I would think not. Yeah. And that's another thing. The general public doesn't know what you're pulling. It's not in the news. The non-flying enthusiasts that might know uncle or brother or sister that might be involved in the hobby, they probably don't know the fine details of what's going on. So I'm thinking maybe try to get news, local news media at our next event. Show them how safe this is. Oh, and that's another thing. I've been flying RC model airplanes for decades. Probably 50, 60 years. Never had anybody maimed or killed by one. That I've heard about anyway. This is already a very safe hobby. But the FAA is imposing these rules under some veil of, to promote security and safety. The United States government deregulated rail. Look at what happened in East Palestine, Ohio. Let's lift some regulation on rail. But just dump a whole shitload of it on us. Pardon my language. But if there's anybody that watches this video that is not a hobbyist like me, please do some research. I had many more points I wanted to make. Can't think of them all right now. Maybe I'll have a part 2 after I watch this one and figure out what it was I didn't mention. Anyway, you all have a great day.